What if the vine of souls doesn't show you God, but shows you everything that's not God within you? For centuries, humanity has told two stories about ayahuasca. In one, it is the devil's brew, a hallucinogenic trap, a jungle poison that lures wanderers into madness. In the other, it is the holy vine, the plant of the gods, a sacred sacrament that opens the door to enlightenment in a single night. Both stories share the same flaw. They hand power to the plant, not the person. They treat ayahuasca as an external force that either destroys or saves, when in truth, it merely mirrors what already lives inside us. Carl Jung would have called this a projection. When a culture cannot face its own unconscious, it projects both its fears and its longings outward onto gods, demons, leaders, or substances. What it refuses to integrate internally, it dramatizes externally. The jungle becomes hell or heaven, not because of what grows there, but because of what we carry into it. In the Western imagination, ayahuasca became a screen for the collective shadow. To the fearful mind, it symbolized chaos, the collapse of reason, the loss of control, the return of instinct. To the seeker, it symbolized redemption, a shortcut to transcendence, a bypass to the divine. Yet both are two halves of the same unconscious fantasy, the refusal to do the slow, painful work of transformation. Jung once said, "When an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate." That is exactly what ayahuasca reveals. Our unwillingness to see the unconscious expressed through the substances we fear or worship. When people call the plant a monster, they are speaking of their own repressed impulses, the chaos of instinct they've never learned to dance with. When others call it a miracle, they are projecting their hunger for salvation, the longing for a mother, a guide, a God who will carry them home. But the vine itself is neutral. It does not care whether you believe in heaven or hell. It only reflects the image you bring to it. The jungle, in this sense, is not geography, it is psychology. Its serpents, its spirits, its infinite green darkness are the metaphors of the mind. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow between the trees, mirrors a movement within your own psyche. And like the unconscious, it is both terrifying and alive. When the shamans of the Amazon call ayahuasca la purga, the purge, they are not speaking only of the body. They mean the purging of illusion, the release of everything false, everything you've hidden under the mask of self-control. To drink the vine is to let the forest of your own unconscious rise to the surface. You do not enter the jungle to find God. You enter to find the parts of yourself you have abandoned in the dark. So perhaps ayahuasca is neither sacred nor sinister. It is the mirror of the age, a vine that grows in the cracks of our collective denial. It offers no salvation, no damnation, only reflection. The question is not whether it's holy or harmful. The question is whether you are ready to see what it shows you, because in the end, the vine of souls does not promise heaven. It offers honesty. And for most people, that is the scariest vision of all. Every human being carries a jungle inside them, dense, alive, full of hidden movement. Most of us spend our lives building cities of control above it. Schedules, logic, beliefs, habits, the neat architecture of civilization that keeps the wilderness out of sight. But beneath that floor of reason lies the original forest of the psyche. Instinct, fear, longing, shame, and creativity intertwined like roots. Carl Jung called this unlit territory the shadow, everything within us that consciousness has disowned. The shadow is not evil, it is unlived life. It is the reservoir of everything you have refused to feel, the rage you swallowed, the grief you buried, the desires you disguised as virtue. It is your raw potential in exile. Jung understood that what we reject in ourselves does not disappear. It waits, like an animal in the dark, until something, a dream, a relationship, a ritual, or a sacred plant opens the gate. Ayahuasca is one such gate. When the brew begins to work, it does not lift you upward into light. It dissolves the floor you are standing on. It pulls you downward, into the tangled roots of your own unconscious, where forgotten memories and mythic forces intertwine. The experience feels cosmic, but what it really does is personal. It reveals the ecosystem of your psyche, unfiltered. In Jungian language, ayahuasca suspends the dominance of the ego, the thin, managerial voice that says, "I am this, I am not that." Under its influence, the border between self and world softens. The mind stops narrating. The unconscious, long suppressed, begins to speak not in words, but in images. A serpent slithers through the vision. A jaguar's eyes stare from the dark. You are swallowed by the forest, and for a moment, you can no longer tell whether you are dreaming the jungle or the jungle is dreaming you. Jung would have smiled at that paradox. He believed that symbols are the natural language of the unconscious. When the rational mind goes quiet, the psyche begins to communicate through archetypes. Images charged with ancient meaning. The snake, for instance, is not just an animal, it is transformation, life shedding its old skin. The jaguar is instinct, the pure intelligence of nature, fierce and alert. The vines that twist through the forest are your complexes. The emotional patterns that wrap around your freedom, and the river flowing through it all, is the self, the total psyche, always moving toward wholeness. What ayahuasca reveals through these symbols is not fantasy, but truth disguised as myth. The unconscious does not argue. It paints, it shows, it confronts you with mirrors in motion, and in each reflection, you meet another version of yourself, the one you denied, the one you abandoned, the one you secretly feared. This is why Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The jungle of your mind has always been shaping your choices, your relationships, your fears. Ayahuasca simply turns on the light. But seeing the jungle is not the same as understanding it. The danger is mistaking revelation for transformation. Many drink the brew and believe they have become enlightened because they've glimpsed the divine. But the divine, as Jung would remind us, is not an escape from the shadow. It is found in the shadow's depths. When you descend into the jungle within, you are not entering something foreign. You are returning to what has always belonged to you. The roots of your being do not lie in your intellect. They lie in your instincts. To reclaim them is not regression, it is integration. It means learning to walk with your darkness, to let it inform your light instead of destroying it. Jung described this process as individuation, the lifelong journey toward becoming whole. The ego, the persona, the shadow, the anima or animus, all parts of the same psyche seeking dialogue. And that dialogue is not polite. It demands honesty, humility, and courage. In that sense, ayahuasca is not a teacher in the conventional way. It does not lecture. It confronts. It drags you to the edge of your own resistance and asks, will you look? Those who dare to look begin to realize something profound. The forest that once terrified them is also their source of life. The vines that choke are also the roots that feed. The darkness that frightens is the same soil from which their creativity and compassion grow. What they feared as chaos becomes communion. Jung believed that the unconscious was not a pit of darkness, but a living field. Dangerous, yes, but fertile. And ayahuasca, in its mysterious intelligence, simply reintroduces you to that field. It reminds you that light and shadow are not enemies. They are dance partners, each shaping the other, each incomplete without the other. So when people speak of ayahuasca as a journey into the jungle, remember, the jungle is not outside you. It is you. Every leaf, every whisper, every pulse of fear is the language of your own mind calling you home. At first, the jungle feels alive with wonder. The vines shimmer, the air hums with invisible music, and every sound seems to pulse with meaning. But as the hours pass, something shifts. The beauty turns strange. The patterns start to bend inward, and the laughter of the forest becomes a whisper that knows your name. Suddenly, you realize that you are no longer exploring the jungle. The jungle is exploring you. This is the moment when ayahuasca begins her real work. Not the visions of light or cosmic love, but the descent, the unraveling of everything you thought you were. It is here that the mind begins to fracture, not because it is breaking, but because its walls are finally thinning. Jung would call this ego death, the symbolic disintegration of the persona, the mask that keeps the unconscious at bay. For some, this moment arrives as terror. The body shakes, the heart races, the sense of I, the one who watches, the one who controls, starts to dissolve like mist. You might feel as if you're dying. You might even believe you have. But what's really dying is the illusion of control. The ego, terrified of its own impermanence, clings to whatever it can, a thought, a breath, a prayer. Yet the vine is merciless in its honesty. It will not let you escape yourself. Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." That pain is not punishment. It is purification. What ayahuasca dissolves is not sanity. It is the rigidity that kept you from seeing. Beneath the surface of ordinary awareness lies the ocean of the unconscious, vast and untamed. And when the brew pulls you under, you begin to see what has been living there all along. The unresolved grief, the buried memories, the shadow aspects you refuse to acknowledge. The jungle at night mirrors this descent perfectly. You hear the insects shriek, the branches crack, the darkness pressing in from every direction. Every sound feels alive, predatory, intimate. It is not the forest that changes, it is you. The deeper you go, the less separation there is between inner and outer, until the entire world becomes a projection of your psyche. The serpent slithering toward you is your own fear of transformation. The jaguar watching from the dark is your instinct, fierce and unclaimed. The whispers of ancestral voices are not hallucinations. They are the memory of the collective unconscious, speaking through symbol. This stage of the journey is what the alchemists called nigredo, the blackening. It is the moment when everything decomposes, when identity decays, when the soul enters the underworld to be remade. To the unprepared, it feels like madness. But Jung saw in this chaos the beginning of individuation, the slow, sacred work of becoming whole. In all chaos, he said, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. The tragedy is that most people flee this stage. They mistake the darkness for failure, the fear for danger, and the loss of ego for insanity. But the unconscious is not trying to destroy you. It's trying to show you what's been destroyed inside you. Every scream, every wave of nausea, every image that unsettles you is the psyche's way of saying, "See me, I have been here all along." If you can surrender not as defeat, but as trust, something miraculous happens. The darkness begins to organize itself. Shapes emerge. The chaos starts to speak in patterns. You realize that the pain was never random. It was the language of truth. The jungle's terror turns into teaching. To descend, then, is not to fall. It is to return to the ancient, untamed intelligence that has always been part of you. Jung believed that every genuine transformation begins in disorientation. The caterpillar must liquefy before it becomes a butterfly. The self must disintegrate before it can reform. Ayahuasca simply accelerates that natural alchemy. And so, when the night grows thick and the mind begins to tremble, remember, this is not the end. This is initiation. The forest is not attacking you. It is introducing you to your forgotten self. You are not dying. You are being reborn, one truth, one vision, one breath at a time. Because the only way to rise from the jungle is to first surrender to its roots. And in that surrender, the shadow ceases to be an enemy. It becomes the soil from which your consciousness begins to grow. In the heart of the Amazon, the shamans call her La Madre, the mother vine. To them, ayahuasca is not a substance, but a spirit, a living intelligence that teaches, tests, heals, and humbles. She is both medicine and mystery, the vine that listens. And for those who drink her brew, she often appears as a presence, a motherly voice, a serpent of light, a vast consciousness that feels simultaneously nurturing and terrifying. To Carl Jung, this image would not be superstition, it would be symbol. He would have recognized La Madre as an expression of one of the oldest forces in the psyche, the feminine archetype. In every culture and myth, the Great Mother is both creator and destroyer. Gaia and Kali, virgin and devourer, the womb that gives life and the grave that reclaims it. She embodies the paradox of nature itself, fertile yet ruthless, tender yet wild. When ayahuasca is described as mother, it is this archetypal energy that manifests. She is not a woman, nor a goddess in the literal sense, but the personification of the psyche's feminine principle, what Jung called the anima, the inner guide of emotion, intuition, and connection to the unseen. Under her influence, the walls of intellect dissolve, and feeling takes the throne. The mind softens, the heart opens, and the soul begins to speak in a language older than thought. But the mother's embrace is not always gentle. Sometimes she comforts you, wrapping you in warmth and forgiveness, showing visions of cosmic unity, whispering truths you'd forgotten. Other times, she devours you, forcing you to vomit, to weep, to relive your wounds in excruciating clarity. The same energy that nurtures can also dismantle. Jung would call this the devouring mother, an archetype that teaches through surrender, stripping away false identities so that something real can emerge. In this sense, ayahuasca does not just heal. She tests your capacity to be reborn. When the mother shows you love, she is not indulging your ego. She is showing you what love feels like, without condition. When she shows you pain, she is not punishing you. She is teaching you how to feel again. The vine holds a mirror up to your emotional truth, and if you cannot look, she will make you. Jung saw the feminine not as gender, but as energy, the receptive, intuitive, creative force that balances the masculine drive for control and order. Modern civilization, built on the masculine principle, has exiled the feminine. We worship logic, speed, and progress, but fear stillness, vulnerability, and mystery. That imbalance is not just cultural, it is psychological. When the feminine is repressed, it returns as chaos. Ayahuasca restores that balance by reintroducing you to the parts of yourself that feel the body, the instincts, the heart's quiet intelligence. But she does so through paradox. You can't reclaim feeling without first confronting the feelings you've buried. Grief, shame, longing, helplessness. These are her sacred lessons. They are the languages of the soul. and the mother speaks them fluently. For many, the serpent is her most common form. Western minds fear it, associating it with sin or danger. But to the Amazonian shamans and to Jung alike, the serpent is not evil. It is sacred transformation. It represents the cyclical renewal of life, death, shedding, rebirth. It moves close to the earth, bridging heaven and soil, instinct and spirit. When ayahuasca appears as a serpent, it is often guiding the initiate through the spiral of change, wrapping around the old self until it cracks open. Yet, there is a danger here too, one that Jung warned against repeatedly. Those who experience the mother's presence often mistake it for permanent enlightenment. They become dependent on her voice, addicted to her comfort, returning again and again to feel her embrace, rather than to integrate her message. This is the shadow side of the archetype, the temptation to worship the symbol instead of understanding it. Jung called this psychic inflation, when the ego identifies with an archetypal power instead of learning from it. The seeker begins to think, I am chosen, I am special, I am beyond others. But the mother's lesson is the opposite. You are not special, you are part of everything. True connection to the feminine does not elevate you, it humbles you. To drink the vine is to drink from the feminine itself, fluid, deep, uncompromising. She will cradle you until you break, and break you until you remember how to feel. And in that breaking, you begin to see that healing was never about becoming pure light. It was about learning to hold both the darkness and the dawn in the same heart. Jung once said that the feminine principle is the soul of humanity. Without it, consciousness becomes brittle. It knows but cannot feel. Ayahuasca, in her ancient wisdom, returns that soul to us not as comfort, but as confrontation. So when she comes to you as serpent, mother, song, or silence, do not ask her for salvation. Ask her what part of you she has come to reclaim. Because the mother does not give what you want, she gives what you have forgotten. When the storm passes and the visions soften, a strange light returns softer, golden, almost divine. You breathe again. You feel reborn. The terror that once consumed you has turned into awe, and the jungle that swallowed you now glows with peace. You whisper, I understand. But this is the most dangerous moment of all, because what many call awakening is often just the ego reborn in sacred clothing. The self that once sought control now seeks enlightenment. The ego, cunning and adaptive, has found a new disguise, the enlightened one. Carl Jung saw this pattern clearly. He called it spiritual inflation. The moment when the small self identifies with something vast, mistaking a glimpse of the divine for ownership of it. He wrote, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. The danger of illumination is that the ego begins to believe it is the source of the light, rather than the one who merely witnessed it. After a powerful ayahuasca journey, this inflation often begins subtly. You return home and find ordinary life unbearable. The laughter of others feels shallow. Conversations about work, bills, or daily routines seem trivial. You start to speak differently, act differently, believe you have seen what others cannot. But what feels like transcendence is often just separation, a refined form of arrogance disguised as spiritual superiority. The ego is like smoke. It changes shape, but never disappears. When it cannot dominate through power or pride, it tries to dominate through holiness. It begins to say, I am awake, and they are asleep. I am light, and they are shadow. In that very moment, the ego has already returned stronger, subtler, sanctified. Jung observed that this inflation always follows contact with the unconscious. The individual touches the numinous, that deep, divine force of the self. But instead of integrating it, they try to possess it. It is like seeing the sun reflected in a lake and believing the light belongs to you. The reflection is real, but it is not the source. In the context of ayahuasca, this trap is especially seductive. The visions are vivid, the emotions overwhelming, the sense of unity intoxicating. For a few hours, you feel omniscient, connected to all life, and yet, the vine's purpose was never to make you a prophet. It was to remind you that you are human. The divine experience is meant to humble you, not elevate you. But humility is difficult in a world that worships transcendence. People post their visions online, speak as healers, and sell enlightenment as a product. The sacred becomes performance. The vine's whisper becomes a slogan. Jung would have called this the inflation of consciousness. The collective ego dressing itself in spiritual language while avoiding its own shadow. The antidote is humility, not the false modesty of denial, but the quiet reverence of awareness. True awakening doesn't make you special. It makes you simple. It teaches you to see the divine in dishes, in arguments, in waiting rooms, in silence. The more real the light becomes, the less you need to talk about it. you begin to understand that enlightenment is not a possession, it's a responsibility. Ayahuasca tests this truth relentlessly. If you return from the jungle thinking, "I have become light," she will show you your shadow again. If you say, "I am healed," she will reveal the wounds you still hide. The vine has no patience for pretense. She strips you bare until humility becomes your only language. In the end, spiritual inflation is not defeated by silence or shame. It is dissolved by service. When you stop trying to shine and start trying to illuminate, the difference becomes clear. You realize that the point was never to be the light. It was to let the light move through you. And that is the test every seeker must face. Will you use the light to separate yourself from others or to serve them? Because only in service does enlightenment stop being an experience and start becoming a way of life. There is a saying among shamans, the plant is sacred, but only if the space is. What they mean is simple. Ayahuasca does not create magic on its own. It amplifies what already exists within and around you. The brew is a mirror, but the mirror needs a frame. Without it, the reflection can fracture. Carl Jung understood this better than anyone. He called that frame the temenos, a sacred enclosure where the unconscious can safely emerge. In ancient Greece, a temenos was a walled sanctuary, a place set apart from ordinary life. Psychologically, it is the inner container that allows chaos to be experienced without destruction. Without a container, even the most profound encounter with the divine can dissolve into confusion or madness. Ayahuasca works the same way. Its power is not only in the chemistry of the brew, but in the container, the setting, and the intention. Each is a thread that weaves safety and meaning around the experience, transforming it from intoxication into initiation. Set is your mindset, the total of your expectations, fears, emotional state, and readiness to surrender. If you enter the experience to escape your pain, the vine will magnify that avoidance. If you enter to see yourself clearly, she will magnify your truth. Ayahuasca is impartial, but the psyche is not. What you believe about the journey shapes what it reveals. That is why preparation is not physical. It is psychological. The question is not, "What will I see?" but "What am I willing to see?" Setting is the environment, the space, the energy, the people who hold it. Traditional ceremonies are conducted in circles around a fire or under the stars, led by a shaman who chants Ikaros, the sacred songs that guide the collective energy. Those songs are not decoration, they are structure. They help the unconscious move rhythmically, giving form to the formless. Jung might have seen them as the heartbeat of the temenos, the rhythm that keeps the descent from becoming chaos. In a sterile room or a reckless party, the same brew can turn dangerous because the psychic field has no anchor. And then there is intention, the silent compass of the soul. Intention is not a wish, it is a direction. It tells the psyche what kind of truth it is ready to meet. If your intention is to heal, you will be shown your wounds. If it is to understand love, you will be shown where you cannot love. The vine does not answer your question. She answers your sincerity. Jung once wrote, "Where love is absent, the psyche becomes unstable." That is why intention must always be rooted in love, not in ego, not in curiosity, not in proving your courage, but in the willingness to meet yourself without judgment. The plant respects that humility. The unconscious responds to that invitation. The rituals of the shamans, the candles, the songs, the circles are not superstition. They are architecture. They give the psyche a place to land. Without them, the inner world spills outward, flooding the boundaries of self and sanity. With them, the chaos becomes art, the shadow becomes symbol, and pain becomes transformation. Ayahuasca does not create order. It reveals what already seeks order within you. It shows the architecture of your soul and asks, "Can you hold this truth without running from it?" That is the purpose of the sacred container, to hold what consciousness alone cannot. Jung described individuation, the process of becoming whole, as the slow building of an inner temple. Each insight is a stone. Each shadow integrated a foundation. Ayahuasca can reveal that temple to you in one night, but it cannot build it for you. The ceremony prepares the blueprint. Your life must become the structure, because without a vessel, the sacred becomes the dangerous. The fire that warms can also burn. The light that heals can also blind. Only when you create a sacred container in ritual, in intention, in daily awareness, does the vine's wisdom become sustainable. So before you drink, ask not only "What will I see?" ask "What space have I built to receive it?" For ayahuasca will not give you more than your container can hold. And perhaps that is the truest mercy of all. The ceremony ends, the songs stop, and silence returns. The jungle hums again with its ordinary rhythm, the rustle of leaves, the distant cry of a night bird, the slow drip of rain from unseen branches. You open your eyes, and for the first time in hours, you realize you are still here, human, fragile, alive. This is where the real journey begins. Because the purpose of ayahuasca is not to show you visions, it is to show you yourself. And what matters most is not what you saw in the darkness, but what you do with that knowledge once the light returns. In the days that follow, something strange happens. The visions fade like dreams at dawn, but their echoes linger, a feeling, a word, an image that won't leave you. The mind tries to make sense of it all. Was it real? Was it my imagination? Did I meet God, or just my subconscious? Jung would smile at these questions. To him, they are the wrong ones. The real question is, what does it mean for your life? Integration is the forgotten half of awakening. It is the process of turning revelation into embodiment, of allowing the sacred to take root in the soil of your daily existence. Jung called this the art of individuation, not escaping the world, but reconciling spirit and matter, heaven and earth, vision and routine. After an ayahuasca experience, the temptation is to chase the next ceremony, the next vision, the next feeling of transcendence. But the vine's wisdom is not in repetition, it's in digestion. You do not need another dose of truth. You need to digest the one you already received. That is why integration is not glamorous. It looks like washing dishes while remembering the sacred. It looks like apologizing to someone you've hurt. It looks like finally listening to your body when it whispers, instead of waiting until it screams. It looks like journaling before bed, letting the words spill like vines across the page. Jung often advised his patients to write down their dreams, not to analyze them, but to honor them. He knew that symbols fade when ignored, but blossom when tended. Your ayahuasca visions are the same. They are messages from the unconscious that must be cared for. Draw them, sing them, walk with them. Let them breathe through art, silence, or service, because when you translate them into action, you turn mysticism into meaning. But beware, integration is not always gentle. Sometimes, after the ceremony, a sense of emptiness appears, what shamans call the hollow. The light that filled you feels gone, and you may wonder if you did something wrong. You didn't. The hollow is not punishment. It is space. The psyche empties itself so that new patterns can emerge. It is the psychic equivalent of winter barren on the surface, but fertile underneath. Jung described this phase as enantiodromia, the swinging of opposites. After ecstasy, there must be stillness. After revelation, there must be grounding. It is nature's law of balance. To resist it is to return to chaos. This is why true transformation is quiet, not in the jungle, but in the morning after, not in the vision, but in the choice to live it. You become the ceremony itself, walking through the world as the same person, yet somehow deeper, slower, more attuned. So when the visions fade, don't chase them. Sit still, listen to the silence they left behind. It is not emptiness, it is integration. Write down what lingers, carry one insight with you, not 10. Let that single truth reshape how you move through the world. Because enlightenment is not about knowing more. It is about becoming simpler. Ayahuasca is not asking you to stay in the jungle forever. She is asking you to bring the jungle with you. Its humility, its rhythm, its reverence for everything alive. And one day, when you find yourself washing dishes, feeling an unexpected calm in the mundane, you will realize the ceremony never ended. It simply changed form. Carl Jung once said, "No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." But he also knew that a young tree, if exposed too early to the storm, can break before it ever learns to bend. In recent years, ayahuasca has traveled far from the jungles of Peru into the cities of the West, into festival tents, retreat centers, and the restless hearts of the young. Many arrive seeking what they call awakening, desperate to feel something beyond the numbness of modern life. But what they often find is not transcendence, but overwhelm. The reason is not moral, it is developmental. The human psyche, like the forest, matures in layers. The roots must grow before the branches can reach the light. When someone without a stable ego, without life experience, emotional grounding, or a sense of self drinks ayahuasca, the flood of unconscious material can drown them. They meet archetypes they cannot yet name, traumas they cannot yet hold, and visions too vast for a container still under construction. Modern neuroscience quietly echoes what ancient shamans already knew. The adolescent brain, still forming its networks of regulation and reflection, is like soft clay. Psychedelics, especially ayahuasca, strike directly at the default mode network, the very structure responsible for identity and self-control. When that dissolves too soon, before maturity, the experience that could have healed instead fragments. The soul touches infinity, but loses the map back home. Jung would call this a premature confrontation with the self meeting the divine before the vessel is strong enough to bear it. He warned that inflation and psychic flooding are inevitable when the ego is too young to integrate the numinous. The result is not enlightenment, but confusion, not awakening, but disorientation. Yet the answer is not to reject the medicine, but to respect the timing. The jungle teaches patience. The vine takes years to grow before it flowers. The shamans spend decades preparing before guiding others. They understand that the light, when summoned too soon, burns instead of blesses. So to the young seeker, do not rush to meet the infinite before you have learned to live the finite. Build your roots, discipline, humility, patience, love, fail, heal, learn. Let life itself be your first ceremony, because ayahuasca will always be there waiting for the moment your heart, not your curiosity, calls her. The vine is not going anywhere. But if you wait, if you grow your roots deep enough, then when you finally drink, you will not shatter. You will blossom. In the end, the vine was never the teacher. It was the mirror, grown from earth, fed by rain, waiting for the moment you were brave enough to look. Ayahuasca does not give you wisdom. It shows you where wisdom has been waiting all along. It does not reveal new worlds. It unmasks the one within you, the jungle of instincts, wounds, memories, and forgotten light that form the true terrain of your soul. Carl Jung understood this paradox before the first Westerner ever drank the brew. He saw that all genuine transformation begins not with ascent, but with descent into the roots, into the mud, into the places we swore we'd never return to. Because only there can we find the gold that no heaven can offer. The wholeness of a self no longer divided between light and shadow. Every vision, every terror, every revelation you met beneath the vine was not outside you. It was you, speaking in the ancient language of symbol. And when the song ended, when the jungle went still, that language did not disappear. It lives in the way you breathe now, the way you listen, the way you choose not to run from what hurts. That is individuation, the alchemy of the soul becoming itself. Jung wrote, "Enlightenment is not imagining figures of light, but making the darkness conscious." And perhaps that is what ayahuasca was always trying to teach. That heaven and hell are not destinations, but mirrors. That God is not found through escape, but through awareness. That the vine does not show you God. It shows you what keeps you from seeing Him. So as you return from the jungle, whether real or within, remember this. You were never meant to become enlightened. You were meant to become whole. If this message speaks to your soul, like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Tell me, what part of your shadow are you ready to meet?